Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 25th of March. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks for joining us on this pretty nice spring morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at the headlines. The search for the remains of a Germanwings plane that crashed into the Southern Alps with 150 passengers and crew on board has been called off after night fell on the remote area. The Korean economy grew 3.3% last year, picking up slightly from growth of 2.9% in 2013. Plus, Korea says it's going to invest more than $5 billion on 19 future growth engines over the next 5 years, with a special focus on the development of commercial drones. Our top story this morning: there's deep shock and sadness in Europe today after a commercial airliner smashed into the French Alps on Tuesday morning local time. All 150 on board the Germanwings Airbus A320 are all sadly presumed dead, and the search has been called off for the night. Let's connect straight to our Eunice Kim, who's been following all the latest developments from the news centre. So Eunice, officials say that given the devastation at the scene of the crash, this is a recovery, not a rescue mission, and authorities are still trying to identify those who were on that flight that was bound for Germany.
That's right, Mark. The French Interior Ministry is saying the priority will be to identify those bodies of the victims. But the recovery itself, the recovery effort itself, is expected to take several days given the steep terrain and a storm that's forecast to come through as well. The Germanwings Flight 4U-9525 took off from Barcelona just after 10 a.m. local time on Tuesday. Search teams scoured the part of the French Alps where plane debris was spotted. The plane is described as obliterated, with not one intact piece of wing or fuselage, and the largest piece is no bigger than a small car. France's foreign minister, who flew over that crash scene, described it as a picture of horror. The nationalities of those on board are still being confirmed. Spain's deputy prime minister said 45 had Spanish names. 2 Colombians and 2 Australians are also believed to have been on board, but most of the 150 passengers and crew were from Germany. 15 teenagers and 2 teachers from one small town as part of a school exchange trip.
The town is deeply shaken. We're in a state of shock. It's the worst thing imaginable.
School was canceled on Tuesday after the news broke, though many are said to have returned to the school in the close-knit community to mourn the unexpected passing of their peers. German Chancellor Angela Merkel expressed deep sorrow at the loss. She has cleared her schedule to head to France when day hits on Wednesday.
And Eunice, there's still a lot we don't know at this point, including why and how this plane crashed. But what information do investigators have to go with at the moment?
Well, Mark, if there is a silver lining to this tragedy, it is that one of the 2 black boxes has been retrieved, which will, of course, help investigators begin their probe into determining why the plane went down. And contrary to some earlier reports, there was no distress call from the plane. The control center declared a distress situation after it lost radio contact less than an hour after takeoff and after it observed that the plane was rapidly descending at a controlled pace, falling some 4.2 kilometers over a period of 6 minutes or so. Germanwings CEO said the last safety check on the plane was on Monday and that the pilot had logged more than 6,000 flight hours on this particular model of the Airbus A320 alone in his more than 10 years with Germanwings as well as parent company Lufthansa.
Yes, very sad to see yet another tragedy involving a plane crash. Now let's move on to some other news on the international scene. And US President Barack Obama has announced the US will maintain its current troop levels in Afghanistan until the end of this year.
Yeah, that's right. That slows the nearly 50% pullback the White House had planned before from the current 9,800. The announcement did come after a meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani at the White House, but President Barack Obama did add the U.S. would stay on track for a complete pullout by 2017. That is why this is a slowdown. He did explain the move was meant to ensure that everything is done to help Afghan security forces still struggling to protect what he called a dangerous country. A tough spring fighting season is also anticipated to fend off Islamic State fighters nearby as well. President Ashraf Ghani, who was elected amid hotly contested results 6 months ago, did thank Americans for standing shoulder to shoulder with Afghanistan.
Well, Eunice, as always, thank you ever so much for bringing us those international stories, and we'll see you back again in around 90 minutes' time during our next newscast.
See you then.
The Korean economy grew 3.3% last year, marking a slight improvement from 2013 when it expanded 2.9%. The Bank of Korea says last year's growth came on the back of a rebound in facilities investments and strong private spending and exports, despite a drop in construction investments. Korea's gross national income per capita last year jumped around 7.5% from a year ago to over $28,000, and we'll have more details on this in our next newscast at noon Korea time. Korea's ICT and industry ministries have unveiled plans to invest more than $5 billion into new growth engines as part of the government's creative economy drive. One up-and-coming area that's of particular interest is the commercial drone market. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
Korea wants to boost its presence in the global market for unmanned aerial vehicles. After the U.S., it was the second country to succeed in developing tilt rotors, which allows for vertical takeoffs and landings for aircraft. Even though it currently ranks 6th in the world in terms of drone technology, domestic regulations have been holding it back from gaining commercial footing, but that's about to change.
Korea's been behind because there was a lack of demand, but with the introduction of drones in the private sector, we see great potential for growth. We are coming up with new eased regulations to spur the market.
This is just one of the industries that is being eyed as a potential future cash cow. The government plans to invest over $5 billion by 2020 on 19 future growth engines, including the robot and smart car industries, as part of its creative economy drive.
We plan to increase investment for R&D, ease up regulations that are hindering growth, and create sophisticated management systems to help new tech industries become the pillars of economic revitalization.
The plan includes other burgeoning sectors like the Internet of Things and fifth-generation networks, and is expected to be finalized in April after a review by governmental bodies and experts in the private sector. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's top central banker has expressed confidence that the domestic economy is on the road to recovery despite some lingering short-term uncertainties. Lee Ju-yeol says the Bank of Korea's recent decision to slash the key interest rate to a record low of 1.75% can only help matters down the road. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
Speaking with economic experts on Tuesday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said he expects the domestic economy to gain momentum. These comments come after the central bank cut its key rate 3 times in the last 8 months, leaving it at a historic low of 1.75%. Those cuts boosted home transactions and led to a sliding Korean won, raising the price competitiveness of local exporters in the global market. The combination of those factors, along with the government's aggressive stimulus measures and low oil prices, have created favorable economic conditions. Dubai crude prices have dropped nearly 50% from a year ago.
The fall in oil prices increases purchasing power. It also pulls down production costs for local manufacturers.
The top central banker, however, cautioned against too much optimism, saying short-term uncertainties still linger over global oil prices and the U.S. Federal Reserve policy. The governor cited Fed Chief Janet Yellen's statement that policy decisions will depend on incoming economic data, indicating that the direction of Korea's key interest rate remains flexible based on fresh information. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, a study conducted by a local think tank has shown us what many people already knew, really, that there's a high degree of social conflict here in Korea. The country ranks near the top of related lists against other OECD member countries, and the report says deep social divisions in Korea are hampering economic growth and changes need to be made from the government level down. Kwon-swa reports.
Poor communication between the government and the people, the gap between the rich and the poor, disputes among politicians. These are just a few factors causing social conflict in Korea. According to a recent report, the nation's social conflict index was the 5th highest among 24 OECD nations. Only 4 countries found it more difficult to deal with social conflict than Korea, while many more handle it better than Korea, with Sweden having the least problems. Studies reveal the way a country deals with social conflict is reflected in its economic growth. And they stress the importance of cohesion in areas like politics, economy, and social culture. In fact, a 10% reduction in social conflict is said to increase the GDP per person by around 1.4%.
Due to this correlation between social cohesion and economic progress, experts say the government needs to find more effective ways to manage these problems.
Korea's Social Conflict Management Index is among the lowest in the OECD, ranking 27th. But data shows there has been improvement, as back in 2000, Korea was nearly rock bottom and has gradually climbed the ranks. Analysts say, however, there's still a long way to go, especially as people are prone to become more and more sensitive towards conflicts and their own interests as they gain more information on social issues.
The government and public institutions are the main agents of conflict management, but their way of handling problems is too one-sided and authoritative. So conflicts between these bodies and the public are radically expanding.
When asked about the economic impact, Park pointed to a silver lining, saying once conflicts are processed and solved, the economy will actually reap benefits. Kwon-swa, Arirang News.
It's been nearly 5 years to the day since the South Korean warship Cheonan was carved in two by a torpedo and sank in waters near the maritime border, taking with it the lives of 46 South Korean sailors. Once again denying it had anything to do with the sinking, North Korea on Tuesday called on the South to lift sanctions placed on it for that sinking for the sake of better inter-Korean ties. For more on how that's highly unlikely to happen, here's our Hwang Sang-hee.
North Korea says it has no apology for the sinking of South Korean warship Cheonan because it had nothing to do with it. Nonsense and never acceptable. That's what the North's National Defense Commission said on Tuesday in response to Seoul's demand for an apology as a precondition to lifting sanctions. Under the so-called May 24th measures, South Korea suspended nearly all inter-Korean economic projects following the torpedo attack 5 years ago. The Unification Ministry dismissed Pyongyang's latest statement, reiterating that the sanctions will not be lifted until North Korea takes responsibility for the attack.
All this comes just 2 days ahead of the 5th anniversary of the tragedy that left 46 South Korean sailors dead. It's also an incident seen as a major turning point in inter-Korean relations.
In an effort to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula, Seoul repeatedly offered to discuss the possible lifting of sanctions at the negotiating table. But with the latest turn of events, experts say North Korea seems to be seeking an upper hand in inter-Korean relations.
North Korea is sending the message that it will not beg for dialogue with the South. Rather than lifting the May 24th measures, it appears to be after the strategic goal of a shift in Seoul's North Korea policy.
With the joint U.S.-South Korea military drills ending in April, there were hopes for renewed momentum between the two Koreas. But experts say a sudden improvement seems more like wishful thinking. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, speculation refuses to go away that the U.S. is determined to deploy its missile defense system known as THAAD to South Korea as soon as it can. And more U.S. experts have weighed in on the issue on the side of the U.S. government. They say the deployment is the minimum operational strategy necessary to counter North Korea's missile threats. Now, Connie Kim tells us more.
U.S. experts are throwing their support behind the possible deployment to South Korea of the American missile defense system, saying it'll make North Korea think twice before launching provocations. Van Jackson, who served as a policy advisor at the Office of the U.S. Secretary of Defense, said the potential THAAD deployment wouldn't solve all the security issues, but is a minimum required to provide protection in regards to the North's nuclear and ballistic missile threats. Speaking at a seminar in Washington hosted by Asan Institute for International Policy, Jackson said it is better to have more missile shields as long as the price is right. He added that the optimal outcome would be the integration of South Korean and U.S. systems. Daniel Chu, a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, said THAAD should give China more incentive to work with Washington on North Korea, especially if it is concerned about the implications of the system beyond countering North Korean threats. Chu also stressed that it is unproductive for China to speak of THAAD's purpose given the nature of Pyongyang's nuclear threats. China strongly opposes a possible deployment as THAAD's radar system, which can cover 2,000 kilometers, could be used to monitor parts of mainland China, including Beijing. Following high-level talks last week, a senior Chinese foreign ministry official publicly called on South Korea to consider Beijing's interests and concerns about THAAD. Seoul, however, continues to stress that there have been no official discussions with Washington on the matter. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And Russia has expressed concern about the possible deployment to South Korea of that THAAD missile defense system, calling on Seoul to carefully assess both the positive and negative repercussions it could potentially have. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that a deployment of THAAD in South Korea could complicate nuclear talks with North Korea and spark an arms race in Northeast Asia. The ministry added that it cannot help but be concerned, considering the destructive nature of the missile defense system's impact on international security and strategic stability. The U.S. says THAAD will enhance Seoul's ability to deter Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile threats, as well as enhancing surveillance on North Korea. A video clip posted on the website of the Japanese embassy in the U.S. is raising some eyebrows here in Korea. In the video titled "Nation Building in the Post-War Era, Japan as a Reliable Partner," Japan lists South Korea as a country that has received aid from Japan, with funds being given to build one of Korea's biggest steel plants and also a subway line. And that's true, but the timing of the video's release, about 1 month before Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's trip to Washington, has many in Korea scratching their heads about the purpose of it. There's growing concern in Korea that Abe will not apologize for Japan's historical wrongdoings during his visit to the U.S. And on a related note, Korea is urging the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to show genuine remorse for Japan's historical wrongdoings if he ends up giving a planned speech to the U.S. Congress. Seoul's foreign ministry says the Abe administration is probably aware of the attention and concerns shared not only by Korea but by the international community as a whole over its understanding of history. The ministry added that should Abe address Congress, he should inherit the historical understanding of his predecessors and call on Japan to sincerely reflect upon its wartime atrocities. Now, Abe is scheduled to make, as we mentioned, a 1-week-long visit to the U.S. at the end of April.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the latest on Park Tae-hwan and his suspension from swimming. Now, a lot of people thought he got away easy with an 18-month ban, which meant that he can actually compete in the Rio Summer Games next year, but turns out he might not be off the hook just yet. Now, according to Korean Olympic Committee's regulation on doping, all athletes who test positive shall receive a 3-year ban from their sport. And while initially Park Tae-hwan was thought to be exempt from this rule, the committee has decided to review this case once again, meaning he may face the 3-year ban after all. If the KOC decides to go with the ban, Park's career would most definitely be over. Now, the Korean national football team hasn't been together since the 2015 Asian Cup, but they're back together once again with the March friendlies against Uzbekistan and New Zealand right around the corner. Now, with the national team facing off against Uzbekistan on Friday, followed by New Zealand on the 31st, the national team members have come together at the National Training Center in preparations for the matches. Now, despite some key injury issues, including Kim Jin-soo due to a concussion, manager Uli Stilicke has a number of backup ready. Meanwhile, Son Heung-min, who initially didn't get the green light from Bayer Leverkusen for the upcoming matches, joined the team either way in order to be on hand for Chaduri's retirement match set for the 31st. And now over to Game 4, the best-of-5 round-of-4 matchup in the KBL between the Ulsan Mobis Phoebus and the Changwon LG Sakers. Now, Mobis one win away from another trip to the championship series, the big game for both teams. Of course, going to the highlights here now, with their backs against the wall, the LG Sakers look like a different team in Game 4 as they outscore Mobis 18-15 in the first quarter before going into halftime with a 33-30 lead. And despite both teams going back and forth in the second half, 5 LG players in double figures in this game as they hang on to force a decisive Game 5 with a 84-79 victory. Now, of course, going into the 2015 LPGA season, all the experts believe that this season would be the season of the rookies, with a number of rookies set to make a splash in the LPGA. And what do you know? So far, it's been true. Now, after Korea's Kim Hyo-joo won the JTBC Founders Cup this past week, she joined Kim Se-young as the 2 rookies to have won an LPGA Tour titles this season. But other rookies have done a great job this season, including Chung Han-ah, who's finished in the top 20 in all their competitions so far. But it's not just the Korean rookies who are dominating the LPGA. Thailand's Arya Jutnagar is currently second in the Rookie of the Year race. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
A chilly start this morning for late March, but things are warming up and afternoon highs will get up to above the average high temperatures. But that means there's a big temperature gaps between lows and highs, so dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. Clear skies and the good air quality will continue all day long today, so go out and enjoy the nice spring sunshine this afternoon. But the air is getting drier each day. Dry weather warning is still in effect here in the capital, and humidity level could go down to as low as mid-teens in the midday, and that's about 30% lower than the right indoor humidity. So be sure to take special attention to humidity control to stay healthy. And as for today's top temperatures, the daytime high here in Seoul and Busan will hike up to 14, while Daegu and Gwangju peak at 15 and 16 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 13 and 15, and Dokdo rises to 9. Now it will get milder from now on, but there's a slim chance of AM shower on Sunday morning. Well, that's all for the weather. Have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather. Bearer of good news. It's going to get a lot milder over the next few days. Well, that's all we have for now. Plenty more stories online, also worth checking out our smartphone application. Do download that. It has all the latest news and programs on it. We'll be back at noon Korea time with our next newscast. So until then, goodbye.